Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for sticking around for this really wonderful panel. I know everybody always looks forward to the judges panel, right? You don't even really need a topic because you see judges and you're like, yes, I got to go schmooze with those judges because who knows when I might be appearing before them, right? So everybody needs to know, even though you may not be in their jurisdiction, it's going to be great to hear from our judges today and what they have to offer, not only to young lawyers, because we have representatives of the Young Lawyers Division, of course. I think that's probably the majority in the room, and some law students as well, but also some, I won't say old, but older lawyers who are here, and thank you for staying this afternoon. Those who are no longer qualify as members of the Young Lawyer Division, but who are here for the section meetings of the section of Civil Rights and Social Justice, and also, of course, the state and local government law section. So I'm Ellen Rosenblum, and I actually, I guess they say once a judge, always a judge. I was a judge for quite a number of years here right where we are, in this very county, Multnomah County, on the circuit court, and this individual wonderful person to my left, Judge Melvin Oden-Orr, is currently on the Multnomah County Circuit Court, having been appointed to that court and then elected, because we do have elected judges here in Oregon on our state courts, elected in 2018. So welcome to Judge Oden-Orr. Seated next to Judge Oden-Orr is Judge Susan Blanco from Colorado, and I don't have her resume memorized, but I did write down a few things. She was appointed to the 8th Judicial District Court by Governor Hickenlooper, and was sworn in January of 2017. So, of course, from Colorado, welcome to our state. And she was previously a deputy district attorney and in private practice in Colorado. And then we have to her left, at a last-minute but fantastic addition, Judge Nan Duffly. And many of you, some of you probably at least, know Judge Duffly as being here as a member of the I think you're on the council, if I'm not mistaken, of the Civil Rights and Social Justice section. She did not know until 5 minutes ago she was going to be on the judges panel.
2 minutes ago.
But you know, if you're a judge and you're in the room, you're going to be on this panel, right? And so here's the deal. I actually have her resume memorized because we go back a long way. So I know that she was the president of the National Association of Women Judges back in 2008. I even have the year right? Close. And she has been on the family court. She has been a judge of the Court of Appeals and a judge of the Supreme Judicial Court in Massachusetts. So welcome to our amazing panel. I started to tell you I was a judge for, it was actually 22 years and then became Attorney General of Oregon. So the funny thing is I still, probably only this judge will know what this means, but I still have to do my Plan B judicial service when I'm done being Attorney General. So I still get to be a judge. I'm pretty excited about that. One of these days.
So if everyone will just change the title from 2 judges to 3 judges and an Attorney
4.
General. Is it 4? Oh, right. Oh, yeah, 4. Okay.
We actually have 4 judges here. So I think we're going to have a lot of fun. We want this to be interactive, but at the same time, we want you to know about the journey of each of these incredible individuals who have become judges and in different communities. And so I think it'll be really interesting to spend at least a few minutes, I think maybe 5 minutes each if that works, for you to tell us about your journey, your path to becoming a judge. Kind of give us some context here and a little bit about your lived experience that supports you in this important work that we do. So if it's okay with you, we'll just go this way. So can we start with
Sure.
Judge Oden-Orr?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Judge Melvin Oden-Orr. Let's see. I have been a judge. I was appointed in December 2017. And I took the bench on January 15th, 2018, a very important day for me because that was Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. Let me tell you how historic this swearing-in day was for me. I was sworn in at home in my living room by the newly appointed first ever Supreme Court Justice of Oregon, who was an African-American woman. My mother jumped up and down when I told her, not that I was appointed, but that woman was going to swear me in. So,
I think we're talking about Judge Adrian Nelson.
Judge Adrian
Justice
Nelson,
Adrian
right.
Nelson. Many of
Justice
you
Adrian
know
Nelson,
Justice
right.
Nelson, I think.
Yeah, my swearing in was all about her. There was a line, there was a procession line. I was at the end of it. Everybody was going to her. It was really cool. But I've been on the court since then. I was elected. I was elected later that year in May 2018, and I've served ever since. In Multnomah County, our judges are either family law or everything else. I'm an everything else judge. Before I came to the bench, immediately before that, I was the chief hearings officer for the city of Portland, where I reviewed land use decisions, other city decisions that were appealed for me to review. Before that, I had my own private, small law practice for about 12 years, doing civil litigation, business transactions. I represented a number of public agencies, including one of my, actually, I represented both of my former public agencies that I worked for. How many of you have been on the MAX, the train? Yeah, I built that. That's what I tell them. That's what I used to tell my kids. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So I worked there. I started out at doing big law at one of the larger firms here in town, where I worked for a number of years, and then went to a smaller firm. As I progressed, I sort of changed my practice a little bit. I started out as a litigator, tort and insurance, started to do some business, commercial litigation, transitioned to doing more transactional work, and what came to happen is, from that point on, I did it all. I did transactional litigation, commercial litigation, that sort of stuff. It's been a great ride.
Thank you. I just have to add one thing, since we do go back a ways.
Yeah.
Whatever that was, and I was a trial judge, there was this amazing young woman who was a deputy district attorney, whose name happened to be Donna Oden-Orr. Any relation? Yes.
Yeah.
The spouse of this judge. But at the time, they were having their family. And so I was, all excited about that, of course. And I remember when she first introduced me to you, and I thought, oh, isn't that sweet, a stay-at-home dad? Right. Well, here he is today. Right. So that and much more, I think you were very, very helpful, so that she could get her start as a fabulous lawyer as well.
And my claim to fame in Oregon, I'm very well known in Oregon, which is how I'm a judge. And I'm known because I am married to Donna Oden-Orr.
Yeah. Well, there seems to be a theme here.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Judge. And now we'll hear from Judge Blanco.
All right, thank you for having me here. So I'm Susan Blanco. I'm the chief judge of the most northern part of Colorado, the 8th Judicial District. So it's home of Colorado State University and a variety of other things in northern Colorado that hopefully someday, if you haven't, you'll come and kind of enjoy Colorado. It's beautiful. It's much like Oregon. My journey was a little different. My family are immigrants to the United States, and I learned a lot of the importance of the law when I was young, because my family had asylum from Iran during the revolution to be here, and they were involved with the government there. So if it wasn't for the immigration policies of the United States, my family probably would not be here. Not only just here, but would not have survived the revolution. And so law was very important to me. Even at a very young age, I knew what law could do. And so I grew up always very interested in the legal profession, but never really knew this is the path that I would be on. I was a debater in college. I was on a full-ride scholarship for debate, also by accident, not something that I ever thought I would do, just something the pre-med instructor thought would be good for me. And so I ended up on a full-ride scholarship for speech and debate for the university, and then on scholarship to go to law school, and that's how I ended up on this path. I was a prosecutor, but that was after I was practicing big law for a little bit and just realized that I wanted to be a litigator. I wanted to be in the courtroom and doing mergers and acquisitions and even corporate litigation when it would take, many, many years to ever see a courtroom. And certainly as a young associate, that wasn't going to happen anytime soon for me. It just didn't feel close enough to what had driven me to want to become a lawyer. And so I quit my job and took a third of the pay to become a prosecutor. And I enjoyed my time there. When I had my first child, I left and opened my own criminal defense practice. I would do, in Colorado, we call it alternate defense work. I think in different states, they have different names for it when there's conflict for the public defender's office. I did private defense work. I was a guardian ad litem for children. And then I started advising municipalities and helping them structure in smaller towns where they were growing how they would handle juvenile law and how they would handle just essentially the demographics of how the police were going to handle cases in those communities. And so had a very interesting small law practice, and then I was appointed in Colorado. You're appointed by the governor. So I was appointed in 2017. And shortly thereafter, I would become the first female chief judge for this area of Colorado and the first Middle Eastern chief judge for the state of Colorado. And so I'm very involved for the standing committees we have. We have Governor's Commission for Access to Justice, but also our Supreme Court's initiatives. I chair the standing committees for access to justice issues in Colorado, and other standing committees for IT. I'm sure nobody wants to really hear about that, but if you do, I'd be happy to talk with you after on a boat, apparently, tonight. So, but thank you for inviting me here today.
Thank you so much, Judge. Judge Duffly, would you like to share a little bit about your path to the bench?
Of course I would, Ellen. Anything for you. I'm really delighted to be here, actually. So I can tell a little bit of my story, which is similar to yours. I was born to a Chinese mother and a Dutch father in Indonesia, where they planned to live, except that there was a kind of regime change, and so Chinese were no longer welcome in Indonesia, and we went to the Netherlands, where we were welcome. But my father didn't want to stay there. He was looking for educational opportunities for the family that he knew that he would have and want to have with my mother. But there were Chinese exclusion acts in many places where we wanted to go, including the United States, which was number one on his choice. And so we actually, I'm from Cambridge now, Cambridge, Massachusetts. I grew up actually in Southern California, but this is where we arrived. In Portland, Oregon. We were invited here as refugees by a church who sponsored us, and that's how we got into this country, because of a wonderful group of people who thought that they would help us get a new life and a new start in Roseburg, Oregon, just a little bit down the road. We landed here after a train ride across the country and then stayed here for a while until there was a recession. And then there's a whole other story about someone from that church who gave us a car so we could drive down. We were then 4 children and drive down the coast so my father could find work. So I guess I was always interested in the law from a kind of different perspective than yours. And yes, am I not speaking up? How's this? Is that better? Do I have to start over? No. Thank God. Thank you.
But you missed a lot if you didn't hear it.
Well, so the most important thing, though, I do want to say, and I think this resonates for a lot of people, I probably wouldn't have ended up on a bench if somebody hadn't suggested it to me. It never would have occurred to me to say to myself, oh, you're going to grow up to be a judge, until somebody said to me, you ought to think about being a judge. And so I thought, okay, I'll think about being a judge. And ever after, I realized that for a lot of people, maybe especially women, maybe just anybody who doesn't see themselves in a role like that because they don't have anybody in their family who was a judge or somebody close, think about it if you haven't thought about it before. It's a great gig. You would love this job. So if you're a lawyer and you're thinking about it and you're still young enough to do it, absolutely. And if you want more encouragement, you can call me and I'll give you some. So how did I end up there and what did I do? I ended up, first of all, I was thinking I would work in legal services, but I had big law school bills to pay, so I thought for a while I'll work in a law firm. that firm, I ended up a litigator, but also a probate and family lawyer, which was kind of a surprise to me. I mean, who does that? You know, do divorces is what I ended up doing. But it actually ended up getting me my first job on our court, which is the probate and family court, which is our equity court, but also did the divorces in Massachusetts. So that's how I ended up there in the first place after someone thought I should be a judge. The firm I was at was also not a traditional place to go, I think, to. I'm really what the point is, there's no traditional way to get there. There really isn't. You can come from a law firm that's small. You can come from one that's big. Mine eventually ended up with a name Gates in it, so it came to be pretty big and national. Some people may have heard about it. And, or you can, be a solo practitioner, and there's really no barrier to that except your own desire to want to be a judge. And it's a really great job, and there's so much wonderful about it. But talk to me if you want. So probate and family court was the first job because that's an equity court, also a divorce court. After that, because I was writing out my opinions so people could understand why I was saying denied or allowed, someone said, gee, maybe you ought to think about the appeals court, which is our intermediate court of appeals, so I ended up on that court. And from there, because I liked writing opinions, at some point someone suggested, and my name came up for the Supreme Judicial Court, which is our highest court. And so I stayed there for a few years, too. And every level was just wonderful and exciting, and I was privileged to have done it. So if you have any questions about that, don't hesitate to ask.
And I think you and also Judge Blanco have taught law, or at least
That's
have
true.
taught at the university level,
Yes.
the law schools. And that is another thing that you get to do, sometimes on an adjunct basis, usually, because you can't do that full time if you're a judge. But once you're done, if you retire, academia is always a good place to turn, along with mediation and other opportunities like that. And,
All the above.
something that I think is interesting thinking about these three judges too is how you get selected, the selection process. And some of you probably, we're from lots of different states, and you know that each state has kind of a little bit different process. You heard that Judge Blanco was appointed by the governor. Well, so was Judge Oden-Orr, but Judge Oden-Orr had to be elected open election, like anybody can run when you're up for the next general election after you're appointed to a vacancy in Oregon, whereas in Colorado, it's a retention-based election system. But in Massachusetts, it's like, it's totally different.
It's for life, but that ends at 75.
Right. Yeah, it's like being a federal judge, right? Except that it goes on
Except
there
it ends.
forever. So maybe that's actually a good thing. So anyways, it's interesting to contrast and compare. But when sometimes people hear, oh, they're elected, how strange, that's terrible. Well, the truth is, as you can see, they're all appointed initially. There's in Oregon, at least, there's quite a rigorous process. He didn't just sort of suddenly become a judge. He had to go through a very, like I said, rigorous committee that the County Bar Association puts together here. So I'm really proud.
11 times.
11 times.
11 times.
Oh my gosh. Well, I didn't know that. Well, anyway, here he is, and we're very glad to have you. So it's wonderful to have this panel, amazing backgrounds, each of you so different and yet some things in common. One of the things that I was asked to have this panel focus on, along with, we could be here all day, and we want your questions. You were told, what was it? Bring your own questions?
Yes, that's
Right. So hopefully you brought them, but we'll get to them in just a little bit. But let's talk first. I'd like each of you to just share, and you can refer. It would be really great because I know that you all spent some time. Maybe not Judge Duffly, since I just got her on the last few minutes, but some of you had time to prepare some materials for the program, for the conference, and of course you can download those. And so if you want to refer to those so that people can, after the session, know where to go to find the materials that you might reference, that will, I think, be a rich resource for everybody. So let's talk about how we can eliminate implicit bias as judicial officers in the courts, both in our own courtrooms, with jurors, with voir dire, but perhaps more generally as well, because this is an issue that all of us care deeply about. But as was mentioned earlier by one of the panelists, I thought it was a great comment. We don't always, we talk a good talk, but we don't know how to do these things, How do we actually do it? How do we go about eliminating bias? Judges have a tremendous amount of power and authority, so you can help us get there. So we'd love to have your ideas.
Yeah. How do we get there? I think so. One amongst the material that you probably saw, if you access the materials for this panel, you probably saw some information about some of the things that are happening on a nationwide level. How many of you are familiar with the National Center for State Courts? Heard that title before? The National Center for State Courts is a body that helps local state courts figure out how to do court, right? We look to them for consultation about how our docket should work and whether we're meeting sort of a national standard in the way that we process our cases and things like that. And so the National Center for State Court, at the height of 2020, when things were falling apart and there were fires everywhere and big old gaping holes were appearing throughout the country, and people were dying at the hands of in police custody. The National Center for State Court took notice, and one of the pieces of information that I provided to you all was a statement from the Conference of Chief Justices and the Conference of State Court Administrators. And so if you think of that as being for state courts, the convening heads of all of our courts coming together, they all passed this resolution that basically said, hey, things are messed up, and they've been messed up for a long time, and they have racial implications, and we should be doing something about it. And so this resolution that they issued reflected an interest or an acknowledgement of historical racial disparities and encouraged state courts to do something about it. And so I would encourage you all to take a look at that resolution that's there. So that's sort of the beginning of that. And one of the things, the first thing that I saw as an outgrowth of that was our Oregon's Supreme Court issuing an unprecedented letter to the bar that said, I'm going to paraphrase, racism is ruining our country, and we all need to be involved in fixing that problem. Unprecedented to hear that coming from any judge, but to hear it coming from the highest court in our state was unprecedented. And I think when you have these high levels of leadership, identifying a problem and encouraging people to get involved and take some action, it gives people like me the ability to go, yes, I have noticed that problem as well. I have some thoughts. And so Oregon, sort of taking the lead from the National Center for State Court, and much like other courts, have taken on issues related to inequities in our pretrial system. Many of you have probably heard about the elimination of bail in jurisdictions throughout the country. Many states actually looking at the issue, so that's been something that's been explored. Fines and fees, the assessment of fines and fees. If you've ever felt outraged that someone who is homeless and gets arrested for theft and found guilty of theft is then has a fine imposed of $500 that they can't pay, and then being brought to court and possibly sent to jail because they can't pay the fine that was imposed because they were stealing because they couldn't afford food. It's sort of this vicious cycle. And so that's one of the issues. So pre-trial, fines and fee issues, and just a number of issues that the courts have taken on. And I've been very encouraged because we've engaged in a very serious process in Oregon, led by our Chief Justice and many of our judges. And I think the idea, if I had to say why are the courts doing it, it's because we we need to inspire confidence in the work that we do. And if you don't, and if you have a high percentage, probably any percentage of your population that doesn't feel like the courts are fair, or there's no justice in the courts, then no one's going to trust it, and you're going to have riots in the street. Yeah, that happens, right?
That happens.
And so those are some.
But never here, of course.
Right, no, but never here. Not in like 2 weeks, I think. So those are just
So
some of the
that,
things
those are
on the
you've done
national
some
level.
great issue spotting there. Really appreciate that. Judge Blanco, I know you've done a lot of work in this area. If you'd like
Well,
to share.
I was going to just share, even in preparation for this, we had a meeting and the opportunity to hear about the things that were happening in Oregon. I mean, this is, very encouraging to have all of you young lawyers that are here in this room, people who are interested in this type of work, because when we talk about these issues, hopefully it spreads and we learn good ideas and take them home. And even listening to Judge Oden-Orr explain some of the things that he was involved with, I just started to read some of the materials he had sent to me that are included in the ones that he provided you. And we also included some extra articles. There was one I know from the Hastings Women's Journal. We are starting to adopt some of those and examining what we're doing in Colorado as well. There's some ideas in there that hopefully will maybe be able to trigger you to go home, talk locally, and see if there are things you can do. For example, there are parts in the state where they provide jury instruction on implicit bias. There are parts of our country that someone had even adopted having a certification for the jurors, not only on the verdict form for their verdict, but also for the jurors to indicate whether that decision was impartial and remove any bias and is fair and just. And so just to call attention one more time. So, we talk about implicit bias, but the truth is that probably for me, until I was a judicial officer, I didn't really study that. When I became a judicial officer and started to teach implicit bias in different legal education, then you start reading and you realize, and you do like a Harvard implicit bias testing. It's not a one and done. It's a constant effort for us to learn where we may harbor bias. And I had bias, and what hopefully happens is once we are aware of it, because it's implicit and we don't realize it's there, then we work on ourselves so that we become better version of ourselves all the time. And you're not just free of it all of a sudden. It's a lifelong commitment to be working on these issues. So when you read the article, it talks a little bit about is it too late to be talking about it in a jury instruction? Is it too late for us to talk about it when we're certifying? Maybe we should be talking about it at the forefront before the jurors even come into the room, before they hear witnesses speak, so that they might be able to partake in some of that same exercise to the best of our ability to give the most fair and impartial process to the litigants that are in front of our courts. And so all of these things are our best practice that we should all be striving to do and to take home with us, to continue to essentially move this evolution forward in the law. If we know this exists, and so many people in the country have not ever examined themselves, you can't just ask, do you have an implicit bias? People get offended. They don't think they have any sort of a bias. That does not sound something comfortable to admit in a jury selection process. So how you approach it as litigators, during voir dire is extremely important, and to create an environment that is comfortable. But that can be starting with the process of how we onboard the jurors before they even walk into the room. The last thing I would just mention to you is, this is a huge responsibility, obviously, but included in the materials, there was a case that came out in 2017 out of Colorado, and it went all the way to the United States Supreme Court because during the deliberation process, it was discovered that some individuals were making statements that were racist against people of Hispanic background, and it was witness, defendant. The Colorado Court of Appeals said that that is, kind of a sacred place. We don't talk about deliberation. And our Supreme Court upheld that because of the precedent of the case law we had in Colorado. But the United States Supreme Court said, no, that's not going to be okay. When we know the process is unfair, or if there's bias in the process, that has to be examined. And so I think that we are a work in progress, but the direction that we are moving and some of these programs that are being described are important for you to take back home wherever in the United States that you might be here from. And then the last thing, and then I'll be quiet, the last thing I wanted to tell you, we also provided to you in the materials some information from that same state court, national state courts that Judge Oden-Orr was talking about. There was something that just came out in September, and it's talking about even how do we pick the pool. So how we pick the pool of jurors can already impact who is coming into the courtroom before they even walk into your court. And so it's really important to go back and examine where the people are getting pulled from, because you may see that there's already a bias even in the process of who's receiving the summons to appear in court. It's really important that we're examining that we're looking at that. And so I would just encourage you to look at some of those materials, because my hope is that this will hopefully spur people to take a greater, deeper dive into what you're doing locally.
That is such an important point, thinking about not just where they're coming from, where they're being pulled from, but it costs money, right, to take a day off. And how many employers are paying their employees to serve on jury duty? They can't, dock you, they can't fire you, but they don't have to pay you, at least in our state, right? So there has to be some kind of compensation from the government. And I think we're working on increasing that. But what is it now? Do we know?
Ours
$10 a day?
Ours, $50 a day.
50, 5 times Oregon. What about Massachusetts? Do we know? No. So that is just that is an implicit bias issue as well. Because if you can't make it into the courthouse, then that's that, and it could be childcare, it could be who knows, all the different reasons. It could be your job. So we tend to get a skewed panel. Judge,
I don't want to
Duffly.
stop there, though. Those
Yeah.
are really important. I don't know if any of you ever think about this. Judges, you in this room and judges up here, we are guilty of implicit bias. And that has to be acknowledged and addressed. So in Massachusetts, not saying that this is the whole answer, but at least it's acknowledged, we have implicit bias training every few years, where these are things that we discuss about ourselves and talk to each other about, and then get training on. And because it exists. I mean, you think it doesn't, but it really does, and that's why it's implicit, because you don't really acknowledge it or know that it's there, and that's why it's insidious. So we do that. I think that's an important step. It's not the only one.
Absolutely.
The things that you mentioned in terms of juror bias, jury selection bias. I mean, there are so many inherent biases in many of the aspects of our justice system that it's really important that you carry that awareness as lawyers back to where you come from. And if nobody has said it, then maybe it becomes your job to do that, right? Yeah. Everybody's got to step up sometimes.
Great
anyway.
point. So, Judge Oden-Orr, I just want to ask you, because I seem to recall seeing that Multnomah County, at least, and I think statewide, there's a jury orientation video that is really focused now on the potential for bias in a kind of a somewhat gentle, maybe not totally gentle way. But I loved that idea. Is that something that you're using now? I just want to be sure.
It is. And so some of you, so in the materials, you will probably see the implicit bias toolkit that was put together by the American Bar Association. Some of the interventions that they proposed were implicit bias jury instructions that many jurisdictions have adopted, as well as a video that would be shown to members of the jury either in the pool or once they're pulled up in the courtroom. And so in Oregon, we've adopted a uniform jury instruction. I know Washington and California are brethren to the north and south have also adopted those instructions, but they're optional, right? They're not mandatory. Someone has to actually request the instruction for the instruction to be given. But the video, at least in Oregon, it's given to all jurors. One of the things that we did, and this is sort of picking up on Judge Duffly's comment about you need to figure out what you can do. A few years ago, a couple years ago, and so in the wake of 2020, when I'm sure many judges were saying, crap, I can't say or do anything because I'm a judge and it'll make me look political, right? It's a real thing, right? And every issue that was happening in the street was an issue that not only could be come in front of a judge, but has come in front of me. Every single one of the issues that you saw in the streets on the news came in front of me. And so one of the things that I did was working with some of my colleagues on the bench in Multnomah County, we brought together lawyer groups that actually practice in Multnomah County, but many of them are statewide. But if they have a connection to this county, they were invited to this meeting, and I included in the materials what I marked as a sample. Basically, we came up with a plan. We created a project called the Impartial Justice Project. They had a different name. Someone suggested a change. We changed it. Impartial Justice Project, and the idea of the project was we have these rules that apply in court, but there are some practices that do not require rule changes that we can review and consider as being best practices. For example, is it a best practice to include an implicit bias jury instruction? Because it's not required. And so the thinking was bringing these folks together to look at these different tools that can de-bias a courtroom, and then have them share that information with their members. I'll tell you what my ultimate goal for the project was in a second, but to share that with their members and then try to get their membership to support the idea that these different things were best practices so that they would be implemented. Multnomah being the most populous county, right? Most populous county in the state. It's not unusual for us to adopt something and then other jurisdictions adopt them as well. Or if you are successful in infecting lawyers who practice in Multnomah County, they will then take those practices other places, and next thing you know, everybody's got COVID. So we went through a process of trying to share these different things amongst the organizations. Now, whether or not we end up, because we're still in the process, whether or not we actually end up coming up with this best practice document, what we will have done is we will have shared the gospel, if you will, of the need to counteract implicit bias in your trials, in your court proceedings, which is my ultimate goal, have everyone thinking about it.
So let's give ourselves a pat on the back, because the judge did refer to the ABA toolkit. We are the ABA here, so we should be very proud that we do have the ABA toolkit on elimination of bias in courts and jury trials. And I hope it's in the materials somewhere.
It's in the materials.
Okay, good, because we should all be familiar with it, right? And take advantage of it. So thank you. Any more comments before we move on to a different topic? Although we could certainly talk all day about
Any
bias.
questions?
Well, just a minute. Let me
Okay,
just see if any
got
of
it.
our panelists have any more comments on that topic. And yeah, let's take a short, like a little break here. Maybe it will be forever, but it will be for the purpose of getting your questions. So if there's lots of questions, we'll just move into that, or we can, if there aren't too many, we might go back to some of the prepared concepts we wanted to discuss, but we don't need to, because it's more important to get your input. And you were supposed to BYOQ, bring your own questions, right? Unless there's beer under the tables here. That will be later. So Yeah, any questions for any of our panelists or a general question? Yes. And please say your name and where you're from. Oh, we have a mic. Okay, you'll take it around then. Thanks, Allie.
Thank you. My name is Priyanka McQuan. I am a second-year law student at Lewis and Clark, so in Portland. My question is for all the judges. I see everybody is a person of color. So just kind of wanted to know your journey, how difficult it was getting to the bench, as somebody that, came from out of state and it being a lot less, a lot fewer minorities in this area, just kind of knowing from the different areas of the states kind of what the process and journey was for you, specifically about your race.
Okay, so with a focus on racial equity and how that process went for you, how much of a factor, how much of an obstacle, or how much of a help, hopefully, it was.
I'll start since I guess I'm here. I'll answer the question giving you a brief history. I am the 11th African American judge ever appointed in the history of the state of Oregon. Up until when I was going to say Judge Rosenblum.
It's okay. It's okay. Once a judge, always a judge.
Right. When she was a judge in my court, there were 3. And there were 3 for a long time, and then there was 1. And then for a long time then there were 2 for a long time. For about 10 years, there were 2. I spent most of my time as a lawyer advocating for diversity on the bench. And I guess I said it too loud because then someone said to me, hey, why don't you want to be a judge? I don't want to do that. I don't want that job. It's a thankless job, and they don't pay you any money. And I got kids that I'm trying to send to college. No, I don't want to do that. Until someone someone looked into my soul and told me who I was. And the answer was, okay, this is something that I actually have to do. I have to do it. And so when I made the decision to become a judge, I saw it as a calling, and which is why I put myself through 11 times going through the process of waiting 8 months to find out if I was appointed to become a judge. That is a horrible process, and I gave up 3 times.
Well, and talk about bias. There's a lot of bias in that system. So I mentioned it before as a great thing. It's not necessarily a great thing because you got to look at who's on that committee. How did they get there in the first place? What are they prioritizing? Are they asking the right questions? And that is, you were not treated well,
Yeah.
but you were persistent, and
I was persistent.
it's wonderful that you were, but yeah, not everybody's going to do that. Do you want to add anything, Judge Blanco?
Sure. So I don't, I didn't really ever feel the same as the other people when I was going through school. And I come from a part of the country that's not very diverse. And so I don't think I saw a lot of diversity at all when I was growing up. And so I don't know if you just kind of press forward and there's something about that. But I think what is instrumental in that process is looking back and trying to make it different, and acknowledging what that was like and what it feels like. I mean, what does it feel like to come to court when you don't speak English as your first language? What does it feel like if you don't understand the documents to fill out, And so I guess lived experience and trying to make it a different system than the way it was when I got there. And it's very motivating, and I feel very blessed and fortunate. But the one thing I wanted to say to you, especially as a 2L, if you decide at some point that this is something you're interested in for any of you, or if you're going in front of, your first interview or anything like that, it is so helpful to seek some mentorship. This process is not necessarily, it's getting a lot better, but it was not something that anyone really taught me what it had to look like. This man has a lot of perseverance. I don't know if I could have done that 11 times. I did it on the second time. I was fortunate that I was appointed by the governor. And, we have a lot more diversity now than even when I started, which was not all that long ago. But we're working a lot on inclusivity, because that's different than having the diversity there. It's making sure people belong there, that they are helpful in the evolution of the law, that we retain the people and the talent that we have. The governor appoints. That doesn't mean they want to stay. And so I guess I would just say, as you're going through your interviews, whether you become judge or whether you're applying for your first law practice, office gig that you're going to hopefully have mentorship, seek people that might be able to help you. It's not in my culture that we brag about ourselves. So someone had to teach me that when you go in there, you have to tell people the things that you've done, and it is a little outside of, I think, the norm of how we operate, but it's necessary to be able to get into some of these positions. So don't be shy about asking for some of that.
Everything that she said and he said, absolutely, and I don't want to repeat it, it's already perfect. But it is important to try and try again. I think we've all had that experience. It's very hard if you're used to, and you all are, you're used to doing well enough in school that you think you're going to go to law school, and you got into a law school, which is wonderful, and so you've done that, and you're going to have to keep doing that, and you're going to have to get used to disappointment. No, you aren't going to be appointed this time, or even the third time. If you really want something like that, perseverance is a big aspect of it. Swallowing your pride and getting over the disappointment of being rejected is huge. But, it makes you strong if it doesn't kill you. And I think it adds to the kind of temperament that you're going to need to survive in that kind of world. And if you want it enough and you try hard enough, you may get there, and it's a wonderful goal to achieve. Wouldn't you all say that you were not sorry to be where you are? I certainly feel that. It's been such a privilege, and it's great. Every aspect of my career has been great. But you do need to find other people who've been there before who can help you. I think that's enormously important, that message. And if you don't know already somebody, look for somebody or call one of us. I've said that before.
And everyone on this panel has been rejected at one time or another,
Absolutely.
including myself, by the way. I had a plan for myself that didn't work out very well at all, really. But I've been the Attorney General of Oregon, the first woman ever, for the past 10 years. That's not too shabby. But I wanted to be a federal judge at one time. And guess what? It didn't work out. I'd be happy to go into that, but I'm just the moderator here.
Me too.
I even wanted to be the president of the American Bar Association, and that didn't work out.
I remember that.
I did get to be the secretary. But you know what? I got to be attorney general because I didn't get to be president of the ABA. So look, there's lots of opportunities if you maintain, just an open mind and, keep, don't be so restrictive that you don't take advantage of opportunities when they come your way, because some things just can't be predicted or planned. So good luck to you. You're going to do great, and I'm happy to do a one-on-one mentorship with you. Okay, and I'm sure the judge here is as well.
Yep, she knows my
So,
wife.
all right, we got it. You got it. All right, more questions. Do you have another question? Yes.
Hi, I'm Tavis Crocker. I'm a 2L down at Willamette University School of Law. And I'm kind of curious. I was over at Polk County Circuit Court this summer and was sort of watching their pretrial release program kick off. And I was just kind of curious to get your guys' take on how those sorts of programs that try to release that bail burden are working. Are they reaching the community that that they're intended to? Or?
So I have to try to filter out the public defender crisis that we're actually experiencing in Oregon right now to sort of focus in on the program. Let me, and correct me if I don't cite the right program, because we're doing a number of things. In the last legislative session, the legislature authorized a change to our pretrial release system, where now we have pretrial release officers who go through the same process in every county. Before it was Multnomah had its own way. We got all kind of money, so we have resources to do some stuff. We have a county, maybe Jefferson County, that don't even have sheriffs or police force, and they've got the state police, so they have a different way of doing their pretrial process. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay, all right. We're really just kicking that off. We just hired our pretrial release officers, and they started. I was in the meeting last week, and he said, "This is my third day." So we haven't really kicked it in, but we have gone through a lot of changes in the way we look at pretrial release. And I wish I could give you real feedback, but I think it's modeled on the way we do it in Multnomah County. And so I think our system sort of works, but people who are sitting in jail right now would probably disagree, right? It's all about perspective.
Yeah.
Oh, one of the big, I'll give you this report. So one of the changes to the system was to make bail not the first determiner of whether or not you get released. But the way it's being implemented now, people who could have bailed out have to sit in jail for 2 days unless they meet the offense criteria, right? So there are certain low-level offenses. There, you get arrested, they take you in, they book you, they throw you back out. But now there are certain offenses where everyone is presumed to stay, even if you could post bail, until the judge sees you, which can be 2 days.
Okay, we're getting a little into the weeds.
Sorry,
That's
sorry.
okay.
Yeah.
No,
It was
thank
a
you.
weak question. I'm
Thank
sorry.
you. No. Any other comments about the bail system or pretrial release from other jurisdictions?
We don't have the same policy. We have a lot of legislation that came through that made certain charges become personal recognizance. You're on your own signature to get out of the jail. And so that became mandatory for certain types of offenses. We set bonds now within 48 hours. That's new for us. That got adopted March of this year without financial support for us to implement setting bonds on the weekends. And so we're going through some growing pains while we're implementing, but it's better than it was before because people are getting their bonds set more rapidly. And so that's good, but ours is different than Oregon. And I don't know if you...
I'm going to pass that.
Okay, thanks. All right, let's get another question. Oh, great. Juan.
Ask for the law students and the young lawyers. Now that you all are on the other side and you've been selected, you've been elected, what are the professional traits that these young lawyers and law students should be mindful of what it takes to become a judge? What is the selection committee looking for, either in your practice, as you go through, developing your career? What should they be thinking about if they want to one day be just like the three of you?
Wow, okay, well, let's go to Judge Duffly.
Four of
I think
you.
she had some thoughts about that.
I do. I've been thinking about and mentoring people on that path for over 20 years and went through it, of course, myself. Do what you love because you love it, because you're going to be good at it. Don't try to figure out in advance what you think are the things that will get you to that point in 10 or years or so. Because you're not going to get there if you're not doing what you love, because that's what you're going to do well at. So choose that first, whatever it is. And presumably it has something to do with the law, right? That's really the best advice that I have. So when I've had the opportunity to talk to young people who wanted to be judges or who wanted to be my clerks, And a lot of people wanted to be my clerk, especially when I was on the high court, right? And those people had aspirations to very similar kinds of advice that I would give and what I would look for. I look for people who were intellectually curious, who were good at what they did because they loved it, and who had a passion for the law and their chosen area of expertise in the law. And it didn't really matter to me whether it was sports law or whether they were good at sports or in art or whatever it was that they were good at. They were good at something and could excel in it and be passionate about it. And they were then, and it was I don't know even how I came up with that idea, but it proved, and therefore I kept doing it over the many years I was a judge, it proved to fulfill itself. Everybody who ever worked for me was so passionate and worked so hard and was so curious and did such a great job that I figured, hey, that must be the right advice. So I'm passing it on to you. I think it works. I can't think of a better thing to say. I think you're going to do fine if you do what you love.
Thank you, Judge. Judge Blanco.
So, my dad at one point had said to me, you're going to have to decide in private practice whether you're going to practice law as a profession or if you're going to be operating a business. Because I think when you're particularly a solo practitioner, you are needing to keep the doors open and pay your employees and give health insurance and do all of the things, right? So you have to have some sort of entrepreneurial spirit to do it. But to practice law as a profession is different than that. You are supposed to be a zealous advocate, but you're building your reputation and who you are as a person every day that you practice. And practicing as a profession and being a steward of this profession, just the fact that you're here at an ABA conference tells me that you are people who take this seriously as a community and being part of a community and learning different ways to take home with you. That type of care for our profession is important, and I think the other people in your community appreciate those things. Those are qualities that, at least for me, even if I'm hiring a magistrate, because the governor doesn't appoint the magistrates, I do. It's something I look for. What are you going to do if you are on the bench? What kind of judge will you be? You're setting that community reputation for yourself every day when you show up in how you practice and how you treat other people. You can be zealous, but you can still be respectful in your zealous advocacy. And the practice of law doesn't have to be cutthroat. You can be good at what you do while you're still being excellent in your professionalism for this practice. So I think working hard, having a reputation for being honest, looking for doing the right in situations, who you are as a person, bringing humanity into the courtroom with you in the advocacy, no matter who it is, which side of the case you're on. Not only prosecutors wear the white hat, defense attorneys oftentimes are very often, I feel like, have a great responsibility. So I guess, in any aspect, do your best to be that type of a person because it will follow you into your path wherever that may lead you. And people know those things about you, and that's the stuff they'll say about you when it's time to go to a governor or when it's time for there to be an election.
Can I just add one quick thing, because you made me remember the one person that I remember still who behaved very unethically during a hotly contested issue we had that was going to go to trial. And I know when he looked at me when I was up on the big bench and he appeared before me that he remembered that I knew what he did. It just will haunt you forever. You can never, ever be that person as a lawyer. Right?
I agree.
Yeah.
Thanks. Do you want to add your 2
I
cents
might-
there?
This was specific to becoming a judge?
Yeah.
Yeah. The only things that I would add would be your personal integrity is,
That's it.
there are times when, if you think about the impact of implicit bias, and you think about how you're impacted by all the societal stuff, you have to have integrity to be able to go, these are the things that I can consider, these are the things that are bugging me that I can't consider, and then make the decision. So you have to have that personal integrity going for you. Treating people with respect. I think they talk about judicial temperament, right? I think judicial temperament, and I watched my colleagues do their work. And when I was a brand new judge, I would sit with other judges and watch them work. And I remember sitting with a judge who, when I was practicing, I really admired and respected. She was a no-nonsense judge. And then I sat with, in the exact same court, in the exact same docket, with a different judge who was closer to my vintage. I think she had been appointed maybe a year before me, and watched her do the exact same thing, and her approach and the way she treated people, the respect that oozed from her pores. I made in my notes, do it like her, right? And because people see that, and your colleagues see it, and so being able to treat people with respect and integrity are probably, in my mind, the most important things.
I want to just add one thing, because I am, after all, now a politician. I have to, run as a judge, but I also obviously have to run as Attorney General. There are some states where Attorneys General are appointed, but ours is not one. So I think it's really important to think about, what's the appointing process? What's the selection process? Who ultimately, is it the governor? If it's the governor that's going to appoint you, then obviously it's helpful to, you're probably not going to get to know the governor personally. You might, if you can, that all the more power to you, but you are going to get to know people who know the governor, right? Maybe you're going to get to know the legal counsel that work in the governor's office. Maybe you could volunteer for a governor's commission and get appointed to a commission of something that interests you. As was noted, do something you love. Don't just do it because it's going to go on your resume. But that's how I got to be a judge. I was on a commission. I was the only woman on a commission that was about corrections planning way back when. And I didn't know the governor, but I knew the staff to the governor because they were staffing my commission. And that's how I became a district court judge early on in my career. So, keep in mind, and I'm not, suggesting that you be, conniving about this exactly, but think about, how do you get there? What are the ways in which the things you want to do anyway, could help to elevate you to the attention ultimately of those who do make this decision? And then finally, guess what? Most states, many states, if not most, judges are elected, okay? Don't be afraid of that, okay? It's okay to run for office. It's not just a dirty thing that you do. It's actually kind of fun. And why? Because ultimately, you're going to be a better judge, right, for having to run. Now, you didn't have a contested race, right? But I did. I had a contested race, my very first one. And so you're forced out into the community. You're forced to meet people and to talk about not the issues in terms of how you're going to rule. Obviously, that's not what you do in a judicial race.
In
but
Oregon.
In Oregon.
In Oregon.
Well, I know some places maybe you do. And there's a U.S. Supreme Court case that says you can do that, but then you're just going to get recused. So why would you do that anyway? But anyway, the bottom line is that you need to be open to and understand how judges are ultimately selected, and not shy. I can't tell you how many judges I know, especially who are on the appellate courts, who are like, ooh, I'm going to have to run for office. I'm going to have an opponent. I'm going to have to go out there and campaign. And I'm like, yeah, you are. And you're going to enjoy it, and you're going to do a great job, and you're going to win. Okay. We have just about 10 more minutes. So I want to give everybody on the panel a chance to close, but I want to also make sure, is there anyone with a burning question who would like to ask? Probably have time for one or two more.
I thought I saw a hand over there.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, we got one over here, maybe one over there.
Hi, my name is Pamela Domingo. I'm a 3L from University of Oregon. I know that judges are required to maintain a level of impartiality in your job, and so I was wondering, how do you balance that when there may be some issues that you're personally passionate about or that impact your lived experience that may make it a little more difficult to remain impartial?
Great question. Okay, who wants to take that one?
I will defer to the left, as I started a lot.
That's a really good question, and I'm struggling with it, actually. I think of myself as someone who strives constantly to kind of explore my own feelings about something, if it's going to appear, is this a case I should recuse myself from? I don't think I can do it in the abstract, but I'm going to guess that you all do it when it comes before you and you know it. And also, I try to not put myself in situations where that's going to come up. If I want to attend something or be a participant in something, no political stuff, first of all. That's just gone from my life during that period of time. But nothing public that's going to be embarrassing for my profession or potentially have an impact on a decision that I make. And I think that, at least for anybody I've worked with or talked to who is a judge, that we share that actually as an important component of who we are as judges, that's a piece of the job that just has to be there. You can't be biased. And it's hard enough a job that you put yourself in situations where there's that potential bias. I would err on the side of recusing myself if I had to, or if I wasn't sure, leave it up to, and I've done this a few times, reveal it to counsel at sidebar and say, this is my situation. I will recuse myself. Just, you make your decision and nobody needs to know, and you'll have a new judge. So that's how I've dealt with it.
And I would say it's important to be very transparent. And I think that some of what Judge Duffly is even saying, we have to be aware of how we behave and what we're involved in, and even the appearance of impropriety. And so all of those things are true. For me, myself, I was an attorney for kids. So let me tell you, some of the criticism I received my first year on the bench was I was a more harsh sentencer for child victim cases. And so I had to really examine, what am I sentencing, and then sit down with the other judges and ask what they do. And sometimes before sentencing, start to just talk with them a little bit. Have you ever had a case like this many priors? What did you do? And I don't know what I'm going to do because I haven't heard the arguments, but I'm aware that that's something that I need to listen and work on, so that if I'm having a bias, it doesn't keep coming into the courtroom. We're human, and it would be a fallacy to say that we don't have any bias at all. I think that our responsibility is to always listen and be open-minded and continue to work on those things as we move forward as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. I have a few thoughts. One of the things when I first came to the bench, one of the things my colleagues, particularly the older, the more seasoned colleagues, would do was to encourage rulings from the bench. In my prior work as a chief hearings officer, I was required to write opinions. And so I was looking forward to writing an opinion about every decision that I made. And after about 6 months of working 7 days a week to churn out these decisions, let's just say I don't do that so much anymore. But one of the key reasons why a written opinion is valuable is it allows you to explain the decision that you're making, right? And so for me, one of the ways that I control when I have issues, obviously first, I don't let lawyers who are close to me appear in front of me. If there are organizations or individuals that I've had close dealings with in my practice, I recuse myself. My staff has a list of lawyers who cannot appear in my court, period, because our relationships are so close. So that's sort of my first screen. But then when I do make decisions, even when they are on issues that I might feel strongly about, I point to the record. I point to the facts that are persuading me, the law that persuades me. So it is clear, at least in my mind, that I have explained why I've made the decision that I've made. And I always end with any questions, counsel.
That's how you end up on the appeals court, don't you? You write things out.
I'll tell you, the appeals judges really appreciate it when you don't write an opinion. Not you,
I
but
know,
anybody.
I heard that, yeah.
Because it makes it harder for them, but it is really tempting, and thank you for doing all that work. I think the most important thing really is the distinction between prejudging. If you've prejudged a matter, you should recuse yourself. If you haven't, but you have biases that everybody has, that, different biases, of course, that you can set aside and be fair and impartial, then I think that is the role of a judge. Otherwise, you'd be recusing yourself pretty often, like maybe every day. And of course, we don't want that. But that's why when you're running for office, you don't want the candidates out there spouting off on, on issues that they're likely to have come before them. So when that does happen, I kind of go, ah. Okay, we just have a couple minutes left. Was there one more question? I think someone over here, I did have a hand up, and I don't want to ignore you if you did. Otherwise, I'm going to ask each of them to give us 1 minute of closing, something you'd like to share that you might have. Oh, did we have it?
No.
Nope, we're good?
It was
Okay.
me going, ooh, I get to.
All right. Ooh, you get your minute of fame here. If there is just one morsel of advice or anything else you'd like to share, and thank you in advance, all of you, let's give them all a hand first of all. Fantastic panel. And now they may not clap again, so you can say anything you want.
Sure. So let me ask, how many of you are involved in the leadership in one of the 3 organizations or sections that are a part of this meeting? If you're a leader, raise your hand.
Almost everybody.
Right? Okay. So
Yeah.
I wanted to see if I was correct to assume that everyone here was
Yeah.
a leader.
Yes.
One of the most valuable things that I've found, or at least to me, since I've been a lawyer, these last, what is it, Juan, 26 years? 26 years, is the value of being at the table, right? I have a particular background that makes me interested in particular issues. And so one of the things that I've done my entire legal career is endeavor to be at the table so that I can be involved in the conversation to help figure out what the end result is, right? There's a phrase, many of you probably heard it. I was sharing with Juan the other night, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, right?
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah, I love that one.
to the extent that you're not, if you're comfortable letting people make decisions that will affect your life without weighing in, yeah, you. But I personally have committed myself to trying to be at the table to help be a part of crafting the future, if you will.
Well, we're glad you are. Thank you, Judge. Judge Blanco, would you like a closing statement here?
I haven't given a closing in a while. So it's not going to be good. No, I would just say I personally enjoy opportunities like this and to interact with people that I don't normally get to learn about what they're doing in other parts of the country or even other parts of the world. I'm getting ready to go work on my LLM starting in May. And I think that we should always be hungry to learn more, and we should be brave to bring those new ideas. These things that are the evolution, they don't happen if everyone sits back. So I agree with what Judge Oden-Orr is saying to all of you. So I would say just stay hungry to always learn more and to be brave and confront issues when you see them so that you're able to make this better than the way we got it.
Fabulous. Thank you so much.
I have a question, actually. Some of you aren't going to be in a position to respond, but who in this room, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand, has ever thought or are thinking about or think you might in the future thinking about being a judge?
Yay.
Great, wonderful.
All right. And is that more than would have answered that way before this panel?
Is this the first time? Okay. So now I have something to say to you that was said to me. You should go and work on all the things we've talked about and suggested to you and keep that in your mind and apply or do whatever it takes in your jurisdiction to take that first step and take it. Okay? You're going to take it? Those of you who raised your hands and
All
said
right.
you wanted to be, are you going to take that first
All right.
step?
She wants your oath.
Yes, yes. Oh.
All right. Well, let's hear it
Good for you.
for our wonderful panel, and for all of you. Thank you so much.